Hello, and welcome to this special interview with London's 2021 mayoral candidates. My name is Jason Okindaya, and I'll be hosting this interview with the Labour Party candidate Sadiq Khan. This event has been organised by the home of Black British history, the Black Cultural Archives, whose mission is to collect, preserve, and celebrate the histories of African and Caribbean people in the UK. The questions asked today have been sent in by BCA's audience across social media. So, good afternoon, Mr. Khan.
Really lovely to join you and be on the Black Cultural Archives mayoral candidates interviews.
Great. Thank you very much for coming. So let's just jump straight into it. What do you consider to be the biggest challenges facing Black Londoners, and how do you plan on helping them?
Well, I think Black Londoners face similar challenges to other Londoners, the lack of a helping hand to have their potential fulfilled. But they face additional challenges because, frankly speaking, we still have racism in the most progressive city in the world and in our country. We saw last summer with the Black Lives Matter movement, the response to George Floyd's brutal murder, a groundswell of Londoners, Black and others, saying enough. And so I think the key thing we've got to do is to address the structural racism, the institutional racism that still exists in our city in 2021. I think the report from the government recently was a whitewash report. And as the mayor, you've seen over the last 5 years, my support to Black communities across London. And if I'm re-elected, I'm going to continue to be supporting them.
And, you've mentioned the race report and describe it as, a whitewash and for its, dismissal of institutional racism. What will you be doing to address the issues and concerns raised by countless stakeholders about the process, methodology, and approaches deployed in writing and publishing the widely discredited Government Commission on Racial Equality and Disparities report?
Anybody who has met bereaved families, as I've done over the last 15 months, who've lost their loved ones, have lost their lives because of the pandemic, knows this pandemic has both exposed and exacerbated the structural inequalities in our city. During the first wave, if you're a Black person, you're 4 times more likely to die than a white person. You and I both know the experience of Black Londoners when it comes to trust and confidence in the police and many others, the number of Black children excluded from our schools, the number of Black people in our prisons, the number of Black people who've got great degrees but are underemployed, if not unemployed. So look, I think most of us who've got any common sense or experience of being in this city, in this country, will recognize the progress made. We're not knocking the progress hasn't been made, but nobody, I think, can think that we're perfect. So I'll carry on doing my bit as the champion, advocate, and mayor of this city, holding the government to account, whether it comes to the Windrush generation, whether it comes to supporting the families with the Windrush Fund, whether it's supporting Black communities and fulfilling their potential, but also holding the government to account. You've seen over the last 5 years, not only the support I've given, but holding to account those in positions of power and influence, whether it's the police, whether it's probation, whether it's the courts, whether it's schools, whether it's people referral units, or whether it's the Prime Minister.
So on the 13th of December 2007, the British government confirmed in a press statement that the 23rd of August, UNESCO's Day for the International Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its Abolition, will be adopted as the focal date for national commemoration in the years to come. The Mayor of London at the time inaugurated and hosted a commemorative event for the occasion, but this was not continued by the new mayor from 2008. The new Mayor of London in 2016 reinstituted the August 23rd commemorative event in 2018. If re-elected as mayor in May 2021, will you commit to continuing the event throughout the entirety of your term and providing appropriate funding that is in line with commemorating such a significant piece of London and British history?
Absolutely. I'm the guy that brought it back for a very good reason. We've got to understand the legacy of the slave trade. I think there's a temptation to think the only story to be told is the story of the Brits involved in the abolition movement. The legacy lives on. And so we have, you're right to remind the viewers, because of the work that we've done in City Hall since I've been mayor, an event every year taking place in City Hall, events taking place across our city. I think actually we need a national slavery memorial in the capital city, because I worry too many people don't understand, A, the real story about slavery, and B, the fact that we're still living with the consequences 200 years on.
If re-elected as mayor, How will you assist in making housing more affordable? And how will you tackle the increasing cases of Londoners living in terrible quality of housing due to neglect from housing associations, landlords, and councils? And could you comment on what you believe your track record is on these issues so far?
Well, I think successive governments have let down our city when it comes to housing. When I became mayor, what I did, the first thing I did was to throw in the bin the previous mayor's definition of what an affordable home is. He thought it was one costing £500 million to buy, or 80% of market value to rent. I've introduced policies that say an affordable home is either a council home, a home where you pay a London living rent, a third of average earnings linked to earnings rather than market value, or thirdly, shared ownership part buy, part rent with a deposit of £5,000. The good news is we've made really good progress. So last year, we began building more council homes in any year since 1983. In the last year when Boris Johnson was mayor, only 3 homes were begun where you pay a social rent. Last year, more than 7,000. Each of the last 3 years, we've broken records in the numbers of genuinely affordable homes begun. But you're spot on. We've got to make sure councils, housing associations, and others who are landlords treat their tenants properly. So we've brought in already a number of things to help those who are renting. The Rogue Landlords Register, so you can check on dodgy landlords. We have a checking system for making sure that landlords are on the licensing system. But also we've managed to persuade the government to get rid of the fee tenants pay to an estate agent when they sign a new tenancy, but also to agree to get rid of the no-fault evictions that many private tenants face. I'm the candidate who's saying if I'm re-elected, I'm going to lobby the government for the powers to bring in rent controls, because whilst we're building the homes we need, it'll take some time. And that's why in the meantime, we need to help those Londoners renting privately. I'll also make this point, over the last 5 years, I've helped more than 11,000 rough sleepers on our streets get off our streets. 80% are still living in homes. And over the last 15 months during the pandemic, we've taken more than 2,300 Londoners off our streets. 86% are still living. So look, judge me on my record in relation to progress made. I think we've laid the foundations to make more progress, and I'll make more progress in my second term if I'm re-elected.
How will you support the education opportunities for Black Londoners, including what you will do to make sure that our histories are taught in schools? But also, I mean, you acknowledged the higher rates of exclusion, particularly for Black Caribbean boys in the education system. What are your plans to address this in local schools and in local authorities where it's particularly high? I know that a number of youth advocacy groups like the Advocacy Academy and the No Exclusions campaign have been engaging with City Hall on this issue. Would you possibly even go as far as supporting a no exclusions policy?
So the last 5 years, I've tweaked the London curriculum by speaking to the Black curriculum to include Black history in the London curriculum, not just in the month of October, but all year round, to make sure our children are taught about Black history and about the role of people of great Black men and great Black women in previous centuries and previous decades. What I've also done is to make sure we're supporting Black teachers when it comes to not just recruitment into London teaching, but progression as well. We've got a mentorship scheme that's been helping Black teachers go up the schools in relation to becoming head teachers and deputy head teachers. It's really important to do so. In relation to exclusions, we've got to understand the consequences of children being excluded from classrooms and from schools. All the evidence tells us that it means them being excluded from mainstream society. You go to a prison or a young offenders institution and you ask how many of you were excluded, nearly all the hands go up. I'm quite clear. When I look at the success of the public health approach in Scotland in relation to the issues around violent crime, it was by reducing exclusions from the schools. So what we're doing is this, Jason. I've paid for youth workers, mentors, coaches to go into schools when a child is at risk of exclusion to stop that child being excluded. Secondly, we've made sure that teachers in our schools are becoming more trained about the issue of trauma. A child can often go to school and, inverted commas, play up because he has seen something the day before happening at home or on the street, and the teacher needs to understand that's maybe because of trauma that the child is playing up. So we're working really hard with the schools to make sure children stay in the schools. Unfortunately, I've not got the powers because I'm in charge of schools to stop all exclusions altogether. What I can do is to reduce the chances of children being excluded by schemes like the stepping stone schemes, when children go from year 6 to secondary school, but also making sure in my next term, my promise is every young Londoner will have access to a mentor, and every young Londoner will have access to good youth facilities. And that includes having mentors inside pupil referral units where children have been excluded. We've got to make sure we improve the life chances of Black Londoners rather than what we see now, which is their life chances being minimised and less good than other children because of what happens in our schools at an early age.
The monthly cost of Zone 1 to 2 is £134.80 in 2020, and now increased to £142.10 in 2021. This is a significant increase with no real additional value. What can you do to ensure that transport will become more affordable for Londoners? Will you commit to a price freeze for TfL in 2022? Is a price freeze enough? Could Londoners perhaps even see a reduction in rates under a second premiership?
So Transport for London is one of the world's best transport bodies. The only reason TfL has financial challenges is because of the pandemic. Londoners did the right thing and stayed at home. And every other transport authority in the world has got help from their government, except for TfL. The government has imposed conditions on support, and one of the consequences is fares have gone up in the last year. I'm the mayor that froze fares for 5 years, which saves the average London household £200. So the cost of a bus was £1.50 when I became mayor. It was £1.50 until the government forced us to increase it, but I managed to persuade them to only increase it to £1.55. So on my record, you can see that I've frozen fares. But also, the government wanted me to remove free travel for those under 18 and to remove free travel for those above the age of 60. I said no, because I know how important free travel is for many parents and carers who've got more than one child, because often in London, the school you go to is not the school nearest to you. So you can tell from my record, keeping free travel for children, keeping free travel for over 60s, freezing fares for 5 years, investing in public transport at the same time as encourage Londoners to walk and cycle, that I believe in public transport. After all, I'm the son of a bus driver. No other candidate has the track record I have of supporting public transport. No other candidate has been a transport minister in a government, and that's why it's important for Londoners to understand what's at stake here if anybody else wins after May the 6th.
From the months of March to May 2020, it was reported in The Guardian that 22,000 searches on young Black men were carried out over lockdown, and there have been significant concerns about the increases in policing, which lockdown has permitted. What will you do about the harassment of stop and search on young Black people in the capital, particularly thinking about also the use of tasers and disproportionate force on young Black people? And how can young Black people expect to gain confidence in the Metropolitan Police?
Well, firstly, we've got to make sure that all Londoners know that this issue isn't just about the Black community, because if the Black community has less trust and confidence in the police, that has an impact on everyone. And that's why it's really important. This is everyone's problem, not just Black Londoners. So last summer, following the Black Lives Matter movement, in George Floyd's brutal murder in Minnesota, Minneapolis, the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, the Deputy Mayor for Communities, and myself went around London speaking to not just Black Londoners, but community leaders and experts with the police to make sure that we could hear for ourselves the experience of Black Londoners, and the experience wasn't great. So we, after the meeting with Londoners during the period of last summer and early autumn, produced an action plan. And the action plan has a number of recommendations that address some of the things that cause concern to Black Londoners for good reason. And so we've now got a greater role of the community when it comes to training the police, a greater role of the community when it comes to monitoring issues around stop and search, a proper review around the police use of force, tasers, stop and search. We've also got a study taking place in London. So we're assessing, when the police stop a vehicle, the ethnicity of the person stopped in the vehicle. We're also getting involved others to make sure that the police can improve the service they provide to Londoners, but also the issue of trust and confidence. I'm the mayor that introduced body-worn videos for our police officers. Why is that important? Because it gives members of the public confidence that the interactions being recorded, but also the police are aware the interactions being recorded as well. And because of the action plan, the community groups can now access the body-worn videos to see for themselves whether stops and searches are taking place properly. There are many other recommendations in the action plan flowing from the meetings we had last summer, and I'm hoping that improves the trust and confidence. A big thing we're doing is not only recruiting more Black Londoners to join the police service, but supporting them being promoted in the police service. So there are more sergeants and more inspectors as well.
Thank you. That was our final question. So thank you to Sadiq Khan for joining me and to all of you for watching. Voting takes place on Thursday, the 6th of May, 2021. Please look at your local government website for details of your nearest polling station. You can follow BCA on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at BCA Heritage. Thank you.
Stay safe.